Hello, David Plouffe. David Plouffe, David Plouffe. Honestly,
Hey,
where are we finding you right now? Where are you, if you don't mind?
I'm in San Francisco.
You're in-
So I've been here. I was on a book tour that got cut short, so I came back to San Francisco about 2 weeks ago. So I've been bunkered in like everyone else since then.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Manny Yakutiel, and welcome to Manny's Super Civic Cyber Conversations. Manny's is a physical space, but we have had to shut down because of the shelter-in-place order. And we thought we're not going to stop doing the work. We're going to keep engaging the public civilly and civically, but on the interwebs. And so today we're so lucky and honored to have David Plouffe, one of the country's most storied and incredible political strategists who also ran President Obama's 2008 campaign, was senior advisor to the president, and has a recent book that he just came out with that we're going to talk about as well. David, hi.
Great to be with you again, Manny.
Yes,
Virtually this time, but I look
yes.
forward to being back in your space. But this is a great idea. I'm so glad you're doing this for the community.
It's not the same, but I'm going to try it. We're going to try to make it feel like we're together. So first, let's
Yeah.
talk about your book. So your book is called Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump. It came out on March 3rd. So kind of fortuitous timing, kind of not so fortuitous timing maybe, because after March 3rd was a very different United States. I know you probably hate to do this because you wrote a whole book about it, but do you mind just giving the folks a little bit of a cliff notes of kind of, all right, you want to be a part of defeating Donald Trump. Let's say you live in the Bay Area, because most of these people are Bay Area folks.
Right.
What is your how-to guide on how you can do the most to beat Donald Trump based on your book?
Well, thanks, man. I got so many questions. Really, as soon as Trump was elected in 16, even after the great election, we as a party had an 18. People like, what can I do? I want to do more. What can I do from California? That's really why I wrote the book. And
Mhm.
so the spirit of it to me is more important than the specifics, although I'll talk about the specifics in a minute, which is your individual effort, where it's an hour a week, or you move to Arizona,
Mhm.
if when that's allowed,
Right,
can make a big difference.
right.
And to think about our individual effort in the aggregate. So I remember when I was at your last time I was with you, an engineer in the crowd said, "Hey, if I go door knocking and I talk to like,
Yeah.
if I think I made a difference to two people, what does that matter?"
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I addressed that in the book, which is, yeah, it's only two people, but if 5,000 other people are doing it that Saturday in Arizona or Wisconsin, that's 10,000 people. The next day, it's another 10,000. Through the course of
Right.
the fall, it's like 160,000 people. So here in the Bay Area, one, you take care of your own business. Make sure you, your family members, your friends, everybody's registered. Everybody's got a plan to vote early. Encourage people. What's your plan to volunteer? Are you going to give money? Are you going to give time? If you've got family members in battleground states who are Democrats or voting against Trump, say you have to be a precinct captain. You
Right.
can write postcards and make phone calls to encourage people to register and to vote, and to call swing voters right from the comfort of your home. I
Right.
really hope the Biden campaign, who's going to be our nominee, asks people to do that any day. And then, if you've got the means and we're able to do this in the fall, physically and health wise, go to battleground states.
Right.
Go to Arizona if you can, go to Nevada. So basically, my message of the book is if you can't think of living another 4 years with Donald Trump as president,
Okay.
and
That's
you
me.
don't do everything
I,
okay, but you don't do
right.
everything you can do, then you kind of deserve that outcome. So this is a time for patriots and freedom fighters and people to get out of their comfort zone and do everything they can. And there's local elections that are super important. We got a bunch of people who are running their first reelection, who won
Right.
those great House races in 18. They need help too. But so many people are asking about what can I do about Trump?
Yes.
And my point is, he's got Fox, and he's an incumbent, and he's got Sinclair, the local
Right.
stations, and he's
Yep.
got Breitbart.
And a
They
ton of
have a
money.
massive infrastructure. Yes, he's already got hundreds of people hired in Wisconsin, in Michigan, Pennsylvania. We got a lot of catching up to do.
Damn. When we so for real quick, one more announcement. If you have questions for David, you can start typing them into the Q&A box. So you don't have to wait for Q&A. You can start typing them in now as we talk. When you and I sat down together and talked at Manny's, you had a relatively bleak outlook because we had a huge field, and you were asked about you were worried whether or not that maybe I asked you, maybe someone else asked you about, we've got this huge field. Do you think that's going to put us in not a great position when it comes to the general? And you said, if this thing goes out till June or maybe all the way to the convention, that means we are missing all this time to actually do
Right.
the organizing to defeat him. So now here we are in March. Obviously, everything going on in the world changes things, and I'm going to ask you about that. But we have two people left, and one person, Biden has a lot more delegates than Bernie or a lead. Do you think that would you change your premonition now? Would you say now we're not going to be waiting all the way until June or July to fight for the general? You think it'll end sooner?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Bernie Sanders has run a great race, but Biden's delegate lead is impenetrable. It's 300. It might as well be 3,000 the way our system works. So Joe Biden's obligation now to all of us is to get on with the general election. Bernie will make his own decision about when he ends his campaign and how he does that. And that's important. But here's why it's so important, Manny. Trump's already organizing all these battleground states. He's registering in those. The people who decide general elections are different than primary voters. You have to be talking to a whole different set of voters in those states. They obviously have to really figure out a campaign that may not have a convention. What if Trump doesn't debate? Trump knows right now, his campaign does, in every battleground state, how they're going to get to their win number. And honestly, with the data they have, they kind of know who those people are. So Joe Biden needs to now quickly turn to an almost entirely different race. Okay. And this is why incumbent presidents rarely lose.
Yeah.
Because they have the advantage of time. Our victory against Romney, which is really hard because the economy was recovering, but still really in not great shape, was because we utilized those first 18 months of the 24-month cycle.
Right.
And so one of the gifts that Biden's getting right now, and we wish it weren't the case, obviously, because it's because of the coronavirus, is the Trump campaign, it's been reported, had planned a massive assault of advertising to go after Bernie or Biden, whoever was going to be the nominee, and spend like a month or two basically decapitating them. I still think that's going to come. It may come as soon as next week, but they've got a little breathing room. But Biden has to mount a general election campaign against an opponent who's fully ready for it. And that was my concern. In open seat races, you have to worry a little bit less about that delta of time. But with incumbent presidents, it's a disadvantage not to be on the battlefield at the same time.
Right. And so this is, I don't want to dwell too much on 2020, but I do want to ask one more question about it, which is how do you, and you have to ask this question, how do you think a global pandemic, which is shutting down a big chunk of the economy, both affects the race, but also more specifically affects the things that you talked about in your book? Do the tactics change now because of the state that we're in?
Well, first of all, we don't know ultimately how this is going to affect the election. How devastating is the economic damage, the health outcomes? Does the virus come back in the fall? Does it not dissipate at all? There's a bunch we don't know. I think in any respect, Trump's handling of it, and I'm sure someone will ask about Poland, is going to end up, something, in my view, that's going to hurt him over time. Now, the activities in the book, so you can do phone calling. I think a really important thing is for people to create their own content. If you have a neighbor or you have a family member that said they voted for Trump last time. I have a brother like this, voted for Trump's, now not going to. When we're able to, talk to people, like ask them to do a 15-second video that you share. If you see a piece of content, whether it's anti-Trump, positive Biden, don't wait, share it. Door knocking right now is obviously off limits in most places. And in-person rallies are off limits. So if you're the Biden campaign, by the way, you have to plan for that scenario. What if that never changes? And this really is a virtual election. For a lot of reasons, we hope that's not the case. But, this is a good campaign plans for all scenarios. And right now, you probably have to plan for 3. We stay in this situation all the way through November. We get some relief fully at some point in May or June. Or you may have some hot spots in the fall and some other places that aren't. So it makes it super complicated. But, let's start by taking care of our own business. I know, talk to your friends and family members saying, oh, you said you might be interested in going to Arizona. Are you still going to do that if we can? My sister just moved from Ohio to Florida. Like she's got to get active in Florida now. So talk to people who can make a difference.
Okay, David Plouffe, you are one of a handful of people who has been in the room with President Barack Obama for a very long time. You were with the man for a while, obviously running his presidential campaign as campaign manager and then in the White House. I would like for you, I want to start it small and then go large. Can you talk to me about a time or two where you were with the president when he was dealing with a crisis, when he had to deal with a crisis, maybe as a candidate and then also as president? And can you tell us about how his thought process and what you noticed from him about what his procedure was to deal with crisis?
Right. Well, for us, I mean, I'll just mention a few and then talk about his approach, which was quite consistent. So when we lost the New Hampshire primary in a big upset back in '08,
Right.
when Sarah Palin was picked by John McCain, when I was in the White House, we had the Arab Spring, we had Syria, uh, we had the shooting at Sandy Hook. We had to prepare for what if the Supreme Court ruled the wrong way on gay marriage on the Affordable Care Act. So in all those things, his approach was always to be sober, to listen to experts, to
Mhm.
scenario plan, to
Mhm.
communicate transparently with the public,
Mhm.
to not tell the American people that a crisis is not a crisis,
Mhm.
or that a
Mhm.
hard thing was going to be easy.
Mhm.
And really to ask a lot of questions and put PR, way down the list of things to be worried about. Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes to my frustration, he just wanted to get the answer right. And
Right.
even if that wasn't the right, if it took us too long and we got penalized for that,
Right.
or we weren't doing enough interviews or whatever. So that is obviously so different than what we're seeing with Trump.
Mhm.
And so I always, as much as those were always challenging situations, Obama was always at his best when we were at our lowest points, because he would rally people, not with bullshit and speeches
Right.
internally, but
Right.
we got to get through this. Let's figure this out. I want
Right.
to hear different views of how we might handle this. I'm
Right.
ultimately, presidents, it's a lonely job, because
Right.
ultimately, if you're in a situation room, there may be 8 people on one side of the table, 8 people on the other, and there's only one person sitting at the head of it.
Right.
And no matter what anybody else says, the buck does stop there. They're making the decision.
Mhm.
That's why I always thought, right when Trump got elected, remember, Tillerson and
Right.
Mattis, and
Right.
it's hey, I've been in those rooms, man.
Right.
They can say all they want. The president's got to make a decision. It's
Yeah.
his or her decision. So Obama was always great during crisis, I thought. And by the way, presidents make mistakes, but whether it's Reagan or Bush or Clinton, they made mistakes, but they tended to say, when the shit hits the fan, congressmen and senators, with all due respect, can give speeches. They're not accountable.
Right.
Pundits and media, that office
Right.
requires sobriety. And you learn working in the White House that a lot of every day is not anything that was part of your campaign agenda. It's
Right.
stuff that just happens in the world
Right.
that's
Right.
ugly and hard, and you got to deal with it and not complain about it. Trump's actually, you can tell, he's pissed that he has to be dealing with this. It's
Right.
so transparent.
Right. I guess my next question is also kind of zooming out for a bit, because all the stuff I've read about President Obama, and I was a White House intern, so I got to interact with him a teeny bit. He did seem very methodical. He gathered a lot of information. I'm reading Team of Rivals right now.
Oh yeah.
I know that which is very long, which he was very interested in bringing lots of different opinions around him before he made a decision. My question to you is more broadly about presidential leadership during crisis, kind of looking at it, all the different examples of how presidents have dealt with very dark times. What do you think is kind of the best qualities that a president can display for the American people in dealing with the time of crisis, more generally?
I'll get to display, because that's more about your communication outward. I mean, again, internally, particularly
Yeah.
if it's global, you're talking to world leaders all the time. We just heard this week that Trump had not talked to President Xi from China in a month. I
Wow.
mean, unforgivable. So you're
Wow.
talking to world leaders all the time. You're talking to experts all the time. You're talking to members of both parties all the time, because you're going to have a response of some sort. We just
Yep.
saw Congress coming together with maybe
Yep.
not an ideal package, but the first of what's needed. And
Right.
so that's what's critical. I think externally, it's to be honest with the American people, to be transparent, not to understate things that are going to be a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Trump has done repeatedly. This is going to be gone. We're going to have no
Right.
cases.
We're reopening
It'll
meter.
miraculously go away. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it defies every playbook about how you deal with this. Um, and I think to be clear, what's going to be required of the American people too,
Right.
that there's going to be sacrifice and there's going to be harm. I mean, Trump doesn't generally do two things. He doesn't show any care or concern or sympathy for people who've died, for people whose
Right.
businesses have shut, for the
Right.
doctors and the nurses.
Right.
And he also hasn't been honest with the American people about this is going to be hard on all of
Right.
you. And to me, that's
Right.
unforgivable.
I read earlier that Woodrow Wilson, when he was president during the Spanish flu, never released any kind of public statement about it. And the reason why was and there are people making a lot of comparisons to Woodrow Wilson and Donald Trump, because Woodrow Wilson didn't want people to stop going to work because he wanted, people to keep, manufacturing in the factories. And Donald Trump, similarly, of course, has tried to play down it. Here in San Francisco, since you are San Franciscan,
Right.
and I can bring it back to here, we've kind of had the opposite take where, very early on, we kind of shut things down. And I wanted to ask you, as someone that's seen political leadership, how do you think our mayor is doing in our politics and running our city during this time?
Well, as it relates to this crisis, remarkably well. I mean, what Mayor Breed did and some of the other local officials in the other surrounding counties, they're the first people to really order shelter in place. And you see it in the numbers. Still, tragically, too many people getting affected with COVID-19. We're still have fatalities here. But that decision, which by the way, was just a matter of days in some cases.
Right.
Now, of course, we see in Florida today, we still got big crowds on the beaches because the governor down there is an absolute nincompoop.
Right.
But and Mayor Breed took criticism for that. People are like, why are we doing this?
Yes.
Doesn't make sense. So you've got to be willing to do unpopular things. But I would, you just mentioned Team Arrivals. I just got done with Eric Larson's new book about Churchill, Splendid in the Vile. I've read everything I can about Churchill in my life, and this book was a great addition to it. But you're reminded, as much as I think sometimes there's mythology that Churchill was just a rah, rah rally. I mean, he was so sober and honest about how hard this was going to be and what they were going through. He showed great emotion. And I think that's one of the reasons people rallied with Churchill. It wasn't just the words of, the beaches and, we'll meet him here and we'll meet him there. It was like, this is going to be really, really hard, guys. And so, I thought Mayor Breed has been really the best example of the country of trying to get ahead of this, of making a tough decision, even when people didn't understand it.
Right.
There was a lot of people. I know I had friends saying, "What are we doing?"
Yeah, I mean,
this seems premature. Right.
Yeah. Manny's had to get shut down pretty early. Can you tell me about a time when you were in the White House and you were in the room with President Obama and you were in the middle of a tough moment and someone in the room wanted to steer it in a direction that was more about public perception than about actually the thing itself, and a time where how the president kind of responded to that and kind of didn't let his opinions get swayed.
Well, I don't want to dime anybody out, but I remember a lot of times, and I was probably a culprit sometimes of this too, where, we're like, we got to go out and say something about this. And he would say, I'm not ready to say anything about that. I'm willing to take another bad news cycle or two because we don't know yet what we're doing. So what's the point of going out and talking about this until we have figured out what we're going to do? That takes enormous discipline.
Yes.
And so that happened time and time again, where he would be like, I get, I'm going to go out there, but it's going to be unsatisfying to the public. They don't need to see me just to see me. They need to see me when I've got something meaningful to say, where I can say, here's how we're going to respond to this new event or, a fast moving crisis. So he was always, PR was second to him. With Trump, we see that's all he cares about. I mean, nothing is opaque with Trump, right?
Right.
And it's hard for me to like, I just wouldn't be able to work in that environment.
Right.
Because when you work in that building, you're very mindful that like you're surrounded by history. It's like working in a museum.
Right.
All the people who are there before you and all the people who are going to be there after you, you're literally just like holding your own for as much as you can and doing the best job. Obama was always really centered on that, which is let's just get our part right here in the American story. So that was generally what he would say is, I don't want to go out. Even if I get criticized for not speaking, which he would get criticized. Where's Obama? Where's Obama? It's like, I'd rather spend my time. That's the other thing. I don't understand how Trump and even a lot of these experts have the time to do 90 minutes or 120 minutes a day at the podium. That's a really wasted time.
Yes. My last question, then we're going to get to audience Q&As. So if you have more questions, folks, there are already a lot of them, but you can start typing them in, is I want to think past this now, and I really do pray, and I hope, uh, first and foremost for the American public, and then of course also for our economy and the small businesses, that this does end sooner than what some people are saying. But it's over. What do you think are the long-term political and cultural ramifications of this couple month period of our current history?
Right. Well, let's pray
Politically,
that's all. Right. Well, let's pray that's all it is. I mean,
yeah,
I think one, now Trump got rid of the pandemic office. So, sin number one. But
yeah,
we as a country at the state and local level now need to prepare for what if it comes back in the fall? What if
right,
it's a different pandemic 24 months ago? How many ventilators do we need?
right,
How much PPE do we need?
right,
Masks, all the things that have been a tragedy really in our
right,
unpreparedness. So,
right,
getting prepared, doing the kind of scenario planning you have to do,
right,
the what ifs.
right,
Um, that I think is critical. I think the question on the economy, I think, Trump is out there saying, "Oh man, once we get the all clear, it's just going to snap back and it's going to be roar back."
yeah,
You as a small
yeah,
business owner know that's not going to be the case.
yeah,
People are going to be cautious, unfortunately. Businesses have to be cautious.
yes,
Consumers have to be cautious. Some of
yes,
the businesses that have closed won't come back. Some of the people who had
right,
jobs won't get them back.
right,
So I think government needs to prepare for that. So what do we do about something that isn't like we get back to the fall and everything's normal? This is a hole that takes us 2 or 3 years to dig out of. What are the types of policy things we need to be doing to prepare for that? I think will be important. My guess is, I hope as an individual level, we all take hygiene a little more carefully
yep,
after this. That would be a great thing. Even if it's not a pandemic, it's going to make us come down with influenza and serious colds less frequently. Um, I don't know. I think this is a fascinating sociological moment. Like,
yes,
families are spending a lot more time together. People are reconnecting with old friends, spending more time on their phone with siblings. I don't know. Like, I can't wait to see the research and data that comes out of that to see if it changes
right,
us any meaningful way. But from a government standpoint, we got to prepare for the next pandemic, and we have to prepare for an economic
yep,
catastrophe
yep,
that Trump is irresponsibly saying is just like, we're on pause. And then we're going to press the accelerator and everything's going to come
right,
back just the way it was,
right, right, right.
which is really, really so irresponsible.
Right. Okay, I'm going to get to questions. We're going to start with some of the questions on 2020. We have Mark asked, what should Biden be doing to reach out to Sanders supporters who aren't thrilled with him as a nominee? And Nick McCarthy asked, in this current atmosphere, what about Biden's response has been good for his candidacy and given him hope? And how do you feel like he's handling it right now as a candidate? Those are two questions on 2020.
Well, the work that Biden needs to do, which is real work with Sanders supporters, will obviously need to accelerate once Bernie says he's out of the race and he's supporting Biden. And listen, Bernie is going to endorse Biden. He's going to mean it. The body language is going to be good. They like each other. Bernie has spoken so powerfully about the threat Trump poses. Like, I think he's going to do everything he can. But that's just part of it. So there's the top stuff that happens at the top level.
Right.
But Biden should be doing a lot of media and outreach to young voters right now. He doesn't have to say, "I'm talking to you as Bernie supporters," because the
Mhm.
primary is still quote unquote going on. All of his organizers in states like Wisconsin and Michigan need to be reaching out to Bernie supporters and say, "We
Right.
need you.
Right.
This is
Right.
over. We need you. We can learn from you." Like, you have to have an open welcome mat. I've heard there's some things from a policy standpoint Biden also could adjust. So he needs to do all that. I think
Right.
at the end of the day, Biden's not going to lose. If we wake up on November 4th and Trump gets reelected, I think the number one reason won't be he didn't get enough Bernie support. But if that foundation's not strong, it's a really weak foundation to build a winning national campaign. So I would spend a lot of time on that. I think Biden's been doing a lot more interviews, which is great.
Right.
He's been doing Kimmel, he's done, happy hour aimed at young people. I think, but he's got to be thinking more social media first, which is, what's my Facebook, Instagram, YouTube plate every day? They're
Right.
putting on a show every day.
Right.
Um, and I think it's got to be a balance of critiquing Trump and what he'd do as president. And then
Right.
Biden needs to be spending a lot of time planning for, you know, what if this doesn't change? How do I win a campaign with the
Right.
pandemic for the
Right.
next 6 months? But if we do get the relief we all hope for, what's my first week? What's my second week? What's
Right.
my third week? Like,
Right.
he's got to spend time.
Doing that, Dave?
Uh, what's that?
Is he doing that? Do you know if that's what they're
I
doing?
think it's happening. Yeah, I think it's happening.
Do
But
you?
Trump's going to be out there trying. This is so important. Biden, you got to, like, Biden is better known than most nominees are running against an incumbent. But still, the people who vote in general elections or who aren't registered or who registered may not vote are not paying any attention to the primary. So you have to reintroduce Joe Biden, his biography, his
Right.
character, the
Right.
tragedy he's gone through, his empathy, and his policy position. So that's a mistake you can't meet. Is you can't go to the 7th chapter of the book.
Right.
So in Wisconsin, in Arizona, in Florida, you have to, and Trump's going to be trying to make that impossible
Right.
by saying Joe Biden is a socialist and he's a sexual assaulter and
Right.
he's someone who doesn't
Ironic
believe
for
in
him.
climate change,
Ironic for him.
immigrants, all the stuff he's going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question from Mark, which I think is interesting. How do you think the presidency has been fundamentally changed post-Trump or by Trump? The office of the president, once this is all over, how do you think that Donald Trump has fundamentally changed the office of the president?
Well, if Trump wins a second term, then his approach to the presidency has been ratified by the American people. So I think that means the next president, rule of law, democratic norms, putting country before yourself, all the grifting and I think illegal financial activity to
Right.
benefit the Trump family. You could argue, hey, everybody knew that, yet the guy won a second term, so I worry about that. If
Right.
Trump gets defeated, it doesn't mean we go back to necessarily a new normal, but and Trumpism is still with us, but I think that that's our opportunity to basically go back to more normalcy. I really do believe that, where you've got presidents who ask tough questions, who
Right.
listen to experts,
Right.
who think before they talk. And I don't think I'm being naive there. And I don't think that's just if Joe Biden wins. My sense is you'll see that more the case than not. But if Trump wins a second term, the other thing I'd say about if Trump wins a second term, there will be at
Right.
least a generation of mostly white male politicians here in America and every Western democracy who thinks this is the way to get ahead.
The way to do
Act like, yeah.
Yeah.
And, that may be, climate change is super dangerous, what he's going to do in healthcare.
Right.
But that could cost us a century, really.
Right.
Scary thought. And 2 more Kavanaughs.
No, please don't say that. I can't. We can't. Andrea Dusteel asks about how right now, with so much attention, of course, on Donald Trump, how do we get more progressives and Democrats to care, volunteer, give money to win state legislative seats and down ballot seats? Because there's so much interest at the top, obviously. How do we let that filter down? And then also, David, I'm getting a ton of questions on who you think would be a good VP pick for Biden, what he should be optimizing for.
Right. Well, on down ballot, now again, we're going to have 6, 7, maybe 8, but my guess is more like 6 battleground states. So that means most of the rest of the country doesn't have the presidential campaign happening. So It's a great way. People may want to make phone calls in Wisconsin if they live in California.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great way to ask people to get involved at the local level. And I think in those battleground states, the presidential year turnout and operation should really help down ballot. They need to run their own campaign. So, but I think right now you do have, now listen, if you're a first responder, you're working around the clock, but I'd say there's a good chunk of Americans now that might have an extra hour or 2 a day. They're not commuting. So if you're trying to get people involved in state legislative races, ask them to get involved right now. There's a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin that's going to happen in April. I know they're doing a good job of asking people both in Wisconsin and nationally to get involved. Super important. And obviously, it worked in 18, given the results we saw. On VP, I would say, one, Biden knows a lot about this because he was the VP. And he went through this process. So he needs to pick somebody, who he wants to serve with for 8 years, who won't annoy him, who will be a source of good counsel. It's not a warm bucket of spit anymore. Who can deal with world leaders, who can deal with Congress, who can take on special projects like Pence has, been given by Trump. So one, who can do the job. Secondly, because of Biden's age, it has to be somebody who a swing voter in Wisconsin or Manny says they can do the job. They can be commander-in-chief on day one.
Yes.
Third, I'd say swing voters aren't really affected by this pick. So somebody who's really torn in Wisconsin between Trump and Biden, they're voting on Trump and Biden. But it can excite the base. I'm excited that Biden has now narrowed this down to a woman as his number 2, which is great. And the great news is we have probably 12 to 15 women who are ready to be commander-in-chief on day one and would excite all of us. So, but
who's on your short list? Who's on your short list? I need to know.
My short list doesn't matter because it is such a personal process. This is who does Joe Biden.
But you also know Joe Biden.
With?
But you know Joe Biden so well. You worked with him in the White House.
Right, I do. But he's thinking about this as I'm going to be in the Oval Office. So somebody else is going to be playing the role I played. Is it? It so much comes down to comfort level. Now, it's clear that he has to choose somebody who's going to be value add on all the things we're going to have to do economically to help dig
Yeah.
out of this hole. So
Yeah.
that's super important,
Yeah.
because that person's going to be tasked with a lot of work around the economic, uh, recovery we're going to be engaged in. And we are. Listen, I know that is, you run a small business. We all want it to be easy. It's not going to be easy.
Right.
It's
Right.
going to take us years to dig out from under this.
You think it's going to take years? Oy vey.
Yes. I hope more like 2 years than 5 years.
Right.
But, because it's not a financial crisis, which tends statistically to take longer, almost a decade. This is more a catastrophic one-time event. But yeah, it's going to take a while to get back to where we need to be.
Hey, David, do you have time for one or two more questions, or you got a jet?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
A lot of questions I'm getting. We have so many. A lot of questions are about Obama, President Obama, excuse me. And whether you, two things. If you think he should be getting more involved in this current time of panic and pandemic, as someone who is a voice of reason, of intellect, and of inspiration and hope for so many of us, myself definitely included. And two, when do you think would be the right time, I'm getting asked, for him to start getting more involved in 2020?
Those are great questions. So for those of you that are on Twitter or Facebook, you see President Obama is posting a lot more frequently than he normally does. So he's posting, probably every 2 days, sometimes every day, about, important data for people to know, thanking first responders, basically subtly responding to Trump. So I'd really encourage you to follow those, and those are getting a lot of shares. I think that's the most important thing he can do right now. And I know he's talking to a lot of governors on the phone and mayors and providing whatever counsel he can. He should not get in until Bernie's decided what he's going to do. He should not look like he's now. If Bernie stays into June or July, I might rethink that. But my guess is, even though Biden was his VP, I don't think it would not go well for Obama to put his thumb on the scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say this: when Barack Obama does get involved, he obviously is someone who has a big social media following, so he can create and share content that'll be useful. He can reach out to African American voters, particularly important because Trump's trying to erode our margins with African American males.
Right.
For those of you that don't know this, they're spending a lot of money in battleground states, just trying to get an extra 2 or 3% from African American males, and he can help unify the party. That being said, obviously I have great affection for Barack Obama. Surrogates, even former presidents, we should be modest about their ability to really move numbers. Mm-hmm. Is someone in Wisconsin who's torn between voting for Biden or Trump going to vote because they hear from Obama? My guess is not. Will an 18-year-old who was not going to register or might register going to be because Obama? Probably not. So, this is part of the message of my book. We're all more important than Obama or anybody else. Because if there's millions of us reaching out to people we have relationships with, that's going to matter more than Obama. So he'll do everything he can. And I do think he's got an ability to attest to Joe Biden's character and his suitability for the office in a really unique way. So I think that will matter. He can talk about the crises and how much he valued Joe Biden's expertise in his counsel and his judgment. But I think Obama will come out and do anything Joe Biden asks him to do. But I think he's been right to wait.
And then this is going to be my last audience question. There are a lot of folks who are, and you touched on this in the beginning, but just to kind of put a pin in it, people are because of the scenario that we're in now, a lot of the typical ways that people know to organize, like you said, knocking on doors and physically showing up for people may not be allowed. So what are things that people can do now? Are there tools that they can use? Is there a certain app, or is it really just picking up the phone and calling? Is there a place people can go? Because people are used to going to the campaign office, right? I worked in New Hampshire in 12. I worked in Lebanon, and all the Democrats in New Hampshire around Lebanon, they didn't care who I was. They knew to come to that one street in Lebanon. That's where the Obama office is going to be, and I gave them their packet, and they knew what they were doing. But this is a whole new scenario, and so what do you think is going to need to happen for people to frame shift this quickly?
So it's a really important question. And I'll just start by saying, before we get to voter contact, this is a great time to get your own act together. What are we as a family, your close friends, your family members? What's our plan?
Right.
right? Are we going to battleground states?
Right.
If we're going to contribute, and some people aren't going to be able to contribute now
Right.
because of they lost their job, but what might that look like? How much volunteer hour time can we really spend?
Right.
Do we want to do 4 hours a week or 8 hours a week? So
Yeah.
this is a time to plan. It's also a time to reach out to anybody you know. And if you know somebody who might have moved within a state, did
Right.
you re-register? They
Right.
might get annoyed. Ask them. And you can check, by the way, on sites like Vote Save America.
Yeah.
You can check to see if your sister who moved
Right.
is registered.
Vote Save
So
America. That's the website.
yeah, votesaveamerica.com. Local state election officials have it as well. But
We'll
basically,
put it in the chat box.
yeah. So basically, this is a great time. What are we going to do? What am I going to do? And I know we don't have all the answers. Like, can we go to Arizona if you live in California in the fall?
Right.
We don't know yet.
Right.
But if we can, what am I going to do? Your own plan. Secondly, right now, in groups like Indivisible, Swing Left. I was just on the phone this week with Ben Weckler, the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party.
We hosted him.
Go there.
So great.
They've got the ability. He's great, and he's got right now on their website the ability to sign up and make phone calls. Same things going on in North Carolina. So right now you got to search that information. At some point, and I don't say this arrogantly, but Joe Biden's going to be your nominee. So what you just described, Manny, what you did in New Hampshire, they got to fill that quickly.
Right.
So that my hope is within 2 to 3 weeks, if Joe Biden's campaign's asking people to say, hey, reach out to these voters in Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida, that then becomes the central.
Right.
But between now and then, Indivisible, Swing Left, state parties, search out that information. But and why can Joe Biden do that if the primary's not over? Well, he's going to be the nominee. The delegate situation's pretty set. And he can't waste time. Like, if we start talking to swing voters in Wisconsin and Arizona in July, we might as well wave the white flag. Okay? Mm-hmm. The most precious commodity in campaigns is time. Mm-hmm. It's time. I mean, before we know it, people are going to be voting early in those states. And we got to find them, and we got to talk to them, convince them to register. So between now and then, utilize great progressive groups, utilize state parties. My hope is Joe Biden very quickly, and if he doesn't, quite frankly, I'll be concerned about that. Needs to fill that breach so that if you want to beat Donald Trump, there's a good place to go, to write postcards, to write phone calls. Even though we don't know if folks can travel yet in the fall, hopefully they're going to ask people to sign up to go to a battleground state if you want to, and be in the battleground states. Like when I was on my book tour, in Wisconsin, in Florida, North Carolina, I told people, I said, listen, you guys have an extra burden, and I apologize for that. But people all over the world, us in California, if you don't deliver your state, we have Trump. Right. So you guys have to humanly think about, so if you've got a sister or a brother or a friend in Wisconsin or Arizona, North Carolina, now's a great time to call them and say, what are you going to do? Are you going to be a precinct captain? How can I help you if you are? Super important. And when I was in those battleground states, it inspired me because people are so motivated to be Trump, but quite frankly, people understandably are a little cowed by it. That is an awesome responsibility to know the future of the free world rests on you. And it does. So one thing I want people in California to think about, or New York or Alabama, who are in battleground states, is we are there to support these heroic people who are working their asses off in these battleground states, who are going to determine, particularly if it's a close election, whether we win or not. And so they deserve our help. They deserve our help.
Right. Well, I'm going to publicly make a commitment to do everything that I can to call, text, and actually physically go to the places that need to be gone to defeat Donald Trump. For everyone that's tuning in and has tuned in for this, first of all, it is Vote Save America, not Go Save America. We have fixed it in the chat box. Lots of people, I saw that. Manny's is closed, and we need your help. We are doing these programs to civically engage you, but also we do need you to support Manny's. Please click on the link in the chat box. It's joinit.org/o/Manny's, and please become a sponsor of Manny's. It's $36 a month, and it is exactly the help that we need right now in order to keep doing what we're doing, to keep these conversations, to keep bringing people like David Plouffe and all of his amazing intellect and glory to the public. So please support Manny's. Please help me keep my small business open and to keep allowing us to do what we're doing. David Plouffe, it's such an honor to know you and be in conversation with you. Seriously.
Well, Manny, first of all, thank you for what you're doing for the community. Secondly, thank you for what you did for President Obama. Thank all of you who are tuning in. Last thing I will say, because I mentioned this earlier, but I should have in that last question. We're all on our devices. So there's a great New York, it's a bad New York Times story for the country, but a story that captures out today, really the month that we lost because of all the Trump administration's testing failures. Share that on your Facebook and Instagram feeds and Twitter. If you're a nurse or a doctor listening, or you live with someone and they're frustrated by what's happening, create a piece of content with them. They can do a 15 or 30-second video. If you see a great infographic to share, I just saw one and shared one that showed the difference between South Korea, who did what they needed to do, and us. Differences couldn't be broader. Share that.
Right.
If your Uncle Jared or your Aunt Ivanka saying, well, what could Trump do? Trump's doing everything. No, he didn't. He's screwed this up more than any president screwed anything up. And that doesn't mean we're not patriotic. We hope everything he does from now on is right. It won't be. But we need to, because he's out there trying to recreate reality. So all of you out there, we don't have Fox, but we have all of you. So be using your social networks to share content, create content, fight back against lies and information. It's so very important.
Well, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Manny.
Thanks for that rallying cry. You can start that by sharing what you thought about today's conversation and how you are going to help defeat Donald Trump. You can tag us at Welcome to Manny's. Thank you to Sam Favela, Jupiter Peraza, and Ramses Olivares from our team for putting these together. And thank you finally again to the most amazing man, David Plouffe. Thank you for all that you do. And
Thanks, Manny.
I'll see you on the battlefield, okay?
Absolutely. See you in Phoenix. Bye.